Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. I want to share with the viewer that at any point through this talk, because it's a live stream, if you feel like engaging the content, you can. Because the power in ideas it has to do with what degree they manifest. Anyways, the title of today's episode is A Road Paved by Nature. And so in this episode, I'm going to try to tightly package various viewpoints I have on nature and certain viewpoints I think it's very important for a living being in a natural world to acknowledge. The subtitle is consciousness streams. Consciousness streams, other people have used that term before, but I used it before even knowing other people were using it. But the way I use it is a bit different. For me, consciousness streams, which I'm going to get into, is how nature has branched out into, how can I tell you, it's like into rivers of thought, where not just objective change, it's not just objective change that accounts for what is here, there's also subjective change. There is the change of attention. So let's dive into it. A road paved by nature is a more poetic way of saying that there is an unknown movement going on. And this unknown movement is as intelligent as the designs are able to acknowledge the intelligence. That means there's this movement. Imagine this movement of particles in space. Eventually, the universe crystallizes. Of course, if we entertain the notion of the Big Bang, from this vast pool of I don't know, dormant energy, suddenly the universe began cooling. And as our universe started being cool, pretty much the unconscious movement of nature became conscious. Suddenly, something was contained with a specification, with a design in mind. This universe would have been less mysterious if there were no individual creatures in it. It has become more mysterious with individual creatures, because individual creatures acknowledge the idea of design. So think of it this way, that our early ancestors were just pretty much, you can consider nature moving. They were not people. Our ancestors were not people. The concept of a person was not alive in the mind of our ancestors, our way back. I'm talking about on an evolutionary scale, like as if one considers kind of bacteria surviving a certain apocalypse upon the planet, and this bacteria, after billions of years, 4 billion years, it suddenly emerges as a, in some sense, conscious entity. There's something going on here. That means there is a road to walk on. There is something to live, to happen here. And the design of the opportunity of a lifetime, which is your wakefulness, is magnificently unknown. That means it's kind of like when you pull the strings of how your reality is kept, you will first instantly realize your inner reality. You will suddenly realize how many things in this world you don't know, yet you symbolically assume. So suddenly there comes this humility that the person no longer starts using language like a hammer to constantly shape the world into what they want. Language is a very elegant tool. It's like a sword that the warrior doesn't pick up unless he feels he's ready. There's a very nice Zen story where there was this sort of kind of very wise and, you can say, to some degree realized person in a village. This like he wasn't even an old person, just a random person there. And this, I mean, not random. He's part of the. Pretty much, this person begins helping the village, and he helps the village to a point where the village, pretty much like that group of people, come up to him and it's like, "Yo, man, why don't you be the typical guru, and we'll be your disciples, and you teach us, you know?" And this is a story like from a couple hundred years ago, as it was mentioned. I read this online, believe it or not. But it was a fascinating story. Like my mind animated, it was real for my mind instantly. So what the story is pretty much is the village comes to this guy who's said some nice things, and and they're saying, "You be the guru, and we'll all listen," and something like that. And this guy feels, "Oh my God, my synchronicities, my intuition is bringing me here." It's like life wants me to teach, I'll teach. But this man is a very is a kind of decent person, and so what happens is the Zen story goes uh, this person the story pretty much goes he becomes a guru for this community, for this village, and suddenly one person in the village asks him a question and says why. Like the question starts with, why does this thing happen? And the person, when he's asked, a sweat comes down from the back of his head. Like he suddenly gets this paralysis of a nervousness, of uncertainty. The moment he feels that uncertainty, this person steps down from the role and says, I can be nobody's guru, nobody's teacher, and he leaves the town. And after 2 years comes back and has a different glow in his eyes. And so the story was there to suggest that it has to do with a sort of honesty with how existence is happening for you. Honesty is not per se just a sort of morality that is linguistically shared only in religious texts. Honesty is when you are true with the data. Okay, and so what happens is when you see these debates on YouTube between atheists and theists, what you notice is that both of them are looking at, it's like two people in different rooms, uh, being incapable to realize as they are in that room, they are not in different rooms. So what I mean by that is that the religious person feels, the theist feels the atheist is not being emotionally honest, and the atheist feels the theist is not being intellectually honest. And this kind of game has gone. It's like, trust me, I thought like, oh my God, 2019, so many new things are happening. But once you really look at what's happening, you see the past is kind of reach into it. And you also see how the future is pulling it. As if think of your past as a child and think of your future as like another child. And these two children are fighting over the present. That means your attention in the moment, usually if you notice people who are stressed and depressed, they have the notion of the past. You see, when a person, the idea of the past no longer exists for them the same way, they cannot get stressed or depressed. It has to do with how you're conceiving the world, and what that means is how you're putting language and reality, how you're keeping language as the world and the world as language. Pretty much how objective reality is leading to subjective significance, and subjective significance is leading to objective. Subjective reality is leading to objective significance. What that means is it's like we were just creatures, we didn't speak, we evolved, we suddenly began speaking, and suddenly like we began putting thoughts on stuff. Okay? And that was a remarkable evolutionary leap. You see? I mean, culture has less patience than history. Or how would I say it? Like, um, the past is extreme. The future, because it is unknown, cannot be projected to have a quality. So when you try to wonder about your future, you're like, I don't know. I don't know where I will be in like 10, 20 years. I don't know what street I would be walking on. I don't know what part of the world I'd be. Like imagine, I mean, not imagine, I mean, there is that wonder there. It's unknown. But when you wonder about where you started from, and when you look at your past, you see the past is something the person is sculpting. Your memories are being sculpted by how your attention is, how your attention moves. That means you guys, you don't understand. Like within your eyes. Excuse me. We are alive. That's our starting point. Human beings must realize before they have any identity or definition, before you identify or define, you are a moment of life. This must be valued. This is the prime value. Sometimes when I kind of walk in the fields of my abstraction and imagination, in these subtler planes when I navigate, my attention. So you see, most people feel their attention is only external. They feel they're aware of only that which is external. To go into deeper dimensions of conscious living, you have to acknowledge the edge of your consciousness. To acknowledge the edge of your consciousness means that confrontation with the chaos of the order you have shaped yourself out of. As if you colored your existence and meaning through certain ordered patterns, and then you're suddenly seeing the direction of the experience is in some sense not just limited to those patterns. You are constantly, just like how a caterpillar, let's say a caterpillar goes through metamorphosis and becomes a butterfly. Inside the cocoon, what is occurring is that the cells of the caterpillar are disappearing, and suddenly, once the last cell of the caterpillar has disappeared, the cells of the butterfly appear. Okay, and so I find that human beings, of course, we're not caterpillars, you know, even though we walk in many shoes, you know, but like we're not a caterpillar, you know. What we are is there's a sort of subjective cocoon. Your personality is a cocoon. It is a sort of bunker of language, a tank of language you have are sitting in and are just moving this tank across an unknown field. Like it is a vehicle. It is a container. And when a container moves, I mean, like, that's pretty much a ship. A person's intelligence cannot be just accepted based on one moment of their expression. When I wondered about the IQ test, like the intelligent quotient and people measuring intelligence, I suddenly felt as if like the person who came up with the IQ test didn't have a high IQ. And let me tell you why. Because to measure, to index, to not to like to see, to be able to give a measurement of something, you have to see the whole thing. Okay, so for example, like a container a 3 liter container, okay, you pour a bit of it, suddenly you see it's like 2 liters are only left, or 1 liter is left. Okay, you have a sort of measurement, you have access to the whole thing, and then as something, let's say, leaves the whole thing, you suddenly notice. So the thing is, in one angle, measurement was an attempt to decide with what was there. But that means this world is so vast, we cannot know the truth. Like, I don't know, like religion and revelation and all this stuff, I understand that it's a lure. I was raised in, until the age of 7, I was raised in Iran. And there was a sort of religion is in Iran, is very interweaved with state. So that means the environment, the society, it is, I don't want to say trapped. I don't want to say Persian culture is trapped in a sort of Islamic boundary. But I want to say that this world is trying to eat you, okay? And I'm being poetic here. Like, don't freak out, guys. I'm being poetic. This world is, in some sense, devouring every person. Now, let me explain what I mean by that. And in a sort of Vedic cultural context, in ancient Indian metaphysics, you know, we find the notion of the god of destruction, like a face of God, was in some sense, how can I tell you? It's like, this is the difference we find. Actually, I can't say difference, but anyways, too many thoughts. I'm having too many thoughts in one moment to be able to share all of them. What I'm trying to say is that in Vedic thought, there's this imagery of a certain archetype of God, of truth, okay? A sort of personalization of truth, where it is how chaos is devouring the order. From, you don't know, for every person on this planet, I think they think they could do the most violent physical thing, but it's like to confront the shadows of your mind means to confront unconscious programs of subtler acceptance that occurred. It's as if, I'm not saying that the person has to reverse engineer back through their sight and their memories and imagination to the core presence of reality, or what good reality is. But I'm saying it's one of those things where you just see your limitations, and in accepting them, then your attention can move on to the limitless, or that which is beyond it. And the issue is, we are getting trapped. So what I mean that the world is devouring you, it's not just the world, the environment is trying to define you. When you see two people speak, when we see the atheist and theist debate, what is occurring? Two people want to devour each other. They have not found a playful. They have not found enough room in the same house. That we have not found enough room for different thoughts on the same planet. Freedom of speech is the most important. It is a pillar of civilization, because it means freedom to see. People tend to speak that which arrives to them through their sensory perception. The road that nature paves is the evolutionary, the peak of our evolution today. And I'm paying attention to a natural evolution, because what happened is that ever since the free will took the steering wheel, suddenly there's a world in a world, and reality is divided. This is why human beings, like, you could take a human being to, in some sense, like a forest, or like some sort of wilderness, where there's, like, okay, let's not say violent animals, but there's deer and, like, just gentle creatures. Yet these gentle creatures will not come near to the human being, because the human being's intelligence is waving in an odd way. That means I remember when I was walking in a forest, so I'm going to be like, okay, like this is an ecosystem. And an ecosystem means, in some sense, various systems of intelligence are behaving in one area, okay? So think of it this way, as if a person walking into a forest, they're not just walking into a forest, they're walking into established natural neighborhood. And so when you walk in nature, you cannot just see yourself. The egotistical tend to run away from nature because nature makes them have to care for the world. The ego doesn't care for the world, it cares for its world. It cares for its design because it has no choice. If I right now say I'm a good guy, suddenly that word has become a mask for me. And I don't like wearing masks, you know? even though, the name Mr. Within is necessary. Oscar Wilde has such a cool writing style that he says, like, he has this quote where he says, "Give a man a mask and he'll tell you the truth." That means give freedom and innovation will occur. Allow people's mistakes. You got to understand, like, no. If you follow this view that success cannot exist without failure, that means the concept of success and failure are like night and day. They are codependent. That means you can only succeed when you have a sort of reference for failure. And this is why when people give up when they fail, they miss out. It's as if they walk the road halfway towards their success. Because the failure is data. It's a test. It's a test of vision. Like, I don't mean like an optician test of it, but I mean like playfully, a person can have physical glasses on, but a person can also have a sort of belief, subjective lenses that they approach the world with. Fear tends to eradicate, like it just fear in your life explodes like a supernova. When you begin to consider the big picture. When you consider the big picture, you find contentment. In the small picture, you find intensity. Human beings right now, they feel they're just this. But it's as if the way nature is evolving is not like a dimensional game where you're in one room and you're evolving to another room, and so this person is going from earth to heaven to whatever, like, what if there's a progression or not, whatever. Like, what I'm trying to say is that the world has been made into rooms. And because it has been made into rooms, there's the notion of a journey, and so change has been, mathematical language has interpreted change. Without mathematics, do you know how limited our comprehension of change would be? For me, the issue is not to get children interested in knowledge, in real knowledge. The thing is how we can awaken a remembrance of the effort of our civilization so far. There's moments where I walk where it's very funny. Suddenly I shift out of being a thought. And what occurs in that moment is this unknown. If you notice, excitement occurs when there's something unknown. And this is why a person who starts trying to think that they know, not only their creativity, like their creative antenna is going to have limited, like, signal. Ooh. When we speak about life, there's a multidimensional context. When we are silent and just watch, it is in a singular context. This singular and multidimensionality have to do with our intelligence changing. Because we are changing phenomena, that our perception of our dimensions change, and because there's this constant change, there's this notion that there's actually something journeying in this life. The biggest question a person should ask is, does time move? Does the idea of time suggest movement? Or is it a static picture? Is it just like an arrow pointing straight ahead? What is time? If we were to ask Plato, he would say time is the moving image of eternity. And we would be like, yo, Plato, what does that mean? And Plato would probably in that moment be like, what it means is that if eternity could move time, it would look like time. So what that means is human beings have acknowledged the known threshold. They have found the edge of the unknown, which is the edge of their knowledge. And perception realigns. That means, like, if I ask you, there could be, here, I'll create an example. Imagine we have two kinds of masters. When I say masters, that means people who have mastered a certain uh, function in a certain reality, in accordance to a certain reality. Now let's say we have two masters. One of them is like some, like Ip Man, incredible martial arts like master. And the other is a master where he does mind, like, how can I say it? His mind moves. The person has mastered their states of consciousness. They can shift their state. That means no longer the external reality is being an extreme conditional justification of how their intelligence moves. They have rediscovered themselves beyond the eyes of the world. What is the path of nature? If you consider creation, it is destruction. If you consider destruction, it is creation. If you consider death the end, there is no beginning. If you consider death the beginning, there is no end. There is no end to this lifetime. And especially when the idea of a multidimensional self comes into kind of the mainstream contemplation, it becomes something where we're like, whoa. So the person is making, just like how they're creating words, just out of nowhere, like, and calling it a dictionary. Similarly, not just out of nowhere, I mean, incredible cultural contributions, but I'm saying, like, just like how we make up words, we are making up beliefs. And so Mr. Within's claim and roar to the modern world is, could language be hollow? And could experience be what is here? And we used to be creatures when we were in the food chain. Like, here's the unique thing. Here's an interesting point. Like, human beings, it took us a while to get out of the food chain. That means our intelligence suddenly evolved to a point where we no longer were playing the same games as other animals. We suddenly became interested in a different caliber and level of being. When multiple dimensions come into consideration, no dimension can define certainty on its own. So each dimension will be a simulation, just like how the colors, like when you see a light beam, a white light beam go into a prism, and suddenly become the color spectrum. That color spectrum, all those different colors that are all one light beam, each color is a simulation, is an illusion that is required among all the other illusions to be a truth. That's kind of like the civilization's puzzle. How 8 billion beings are seen as efficient contributors through an acknowledgement beyond just their own thoughts and anyone else's thought. We should not be madmen obsessed about freedom. At the same time, we should not be, in some sense, violent controllers of a temporary world. The idea that life ends is not helpful, even though it is objectively evident. I'm not saying like every person physically dies, and I'm not saying that there's something like you. You have to start simple. That's the secret to mastery. Once you understand the simple introduction of any field of knowledge, what the simplest thing, it's like it's like, think of it this way. Imagine you are a person who suddenly wants to know what's a good example? Let's say you want to know physics, okay, and astrophysics, and in some sense, how would I say it? It's like there's a world you haven't seen yet. You gotta just walk towards it, and you'll eventually see certain designs. But by the time you get to the end of the journey, you're gonna be a totally different being. So fear of death is meaningless because each moment is a unique generation of the brain chemistry of the body. So it's not that a person just changes their mind just because they choose to have their attention on something else. It's like their mind changes because the projector changes. It's as if, imagine a film projector, but now instead of a film projector like you can buy online, imagine that film, the body of the projector, being organic, biological, and endlessly changing. So our hint on this planet is that everything is changing except change. This is one of those ultimate sights of how the moment is here. Because you have to meet it. That's the thing. It's like before physically you had to be strong. Now you have to have a strong awareness towards life. You have to recognize how an idea can steal your attention. Yet at the same time, it can move your attention. So there's a navigation going on. Your free will can move your moment of being, but when you sleep, what do you think is moving your moment of being? Do you have free will when you are in deep sleep, not like a dream state, but in a deep sleep state? You don't have free will. So if free will is not an issue, nature moves. So we are walking in a natural world, a road paved by nature. A Buddhist, imagine, like, guys, I think I managed to design a very playful kind of joke. And the joke is, a Buddhist goes into a job interview and tells the Buddhist, tell me about your past experience. And the Buddhist looks at him and says, which lifetime you want to hear about, or which, something like that. What I'm trying to say is, the depth of what is deep for knowledge is the unknown. Whenever every person hears something new, that it's adding it's an added dimension, therefore it's depth. So it's like, I've talked to some people, and sometimes the certain things I've discussed with them, I've often seen the reaction. It's like they say that's deep, and I'm like, what does that mean? How is the person saying that's deep? How is the surface of the ocean separated from its depth? How is one moment being divided, or does it have to be divided? Could your moment of being just be complete before you doubt, before you have to constantly play around with ideas of self that come and go like the leaves of a tree through the passing of the seasons? We must live life, but the best way to do it is to live it playfully. That means we don't take anything too seriously. At the same time, we don't take anything not too seriously, you know. So in some sense, we are mindful of the various parts of civilization we need to protect. Let me tell you the value of society. It is, every human being has the wrong picture of the civilization. And of course, this is an implication of how I am, in some sense, uh, standing on a different kind of mountain. But I'm saying civilization should inspire honor. It's as if children, there will come a day where children will be born and they will look at how the world is behaving, and they will see it's as if civilization is the brain of humanity. It is the objective of the collective being. It is the objective component of the collective being. So in some sense, how would I say it? We have to protect humanity's brain from individual ignorance. We have to protect the collective efficient possibilities of the civilization from individual ignorance. And there will forever, till the end of time, be individual ignorance. Like, there's this quote from Einstein. Let me find it. Einstein has like this really like Einstein's sense of humor was epic. He says, here's the quote from Albert Einstein. He says, he has some, okay, there's a bunch of quotes, but I'm going to read the one I had in mind. Okay, here. Albert Einstein says, this is the one I want the quote I want you to hear. He says, two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a man who is in some sense playfully living in the intense situations of life. He's his like Albert Einstein in this quote. He's like looking at the sky and he's like, "Whoa, what if it's not endless space till the end of time?" You know, it was an unknown for him. Anyways, Albert Einstein has this other quote. He says the difference between stupidity and genius is that genius has its limits. And uh, how would I say this? Yeah, if you don't abide by your true nature, you will just dwell as a thought, and suddenly you will get drained energetically, and you have to either sleep or meditate or do something to return to, in some sense, the natural abidance of the moment. It's like, think of it this way: the moment you wake up in the morning, you are like a surfer, but your surfboard is your whole moment of being, and there is an attention. There's an just like a presence of attention. That's what a moment of being is, you know? I noticed before, it's like, wow, wow. How I interpret this Albert Einstein's quote here, he's pretty much saying the difference between someone that sees more and someone that sees less is that the person who sees more will eventually have certain limits. It because how can I say it? Nothing can become more complex unless there's a division and acceptance of. It's as if your free will, just like a biological cell, is replicating itself and becoming something bigger. Okay, that's how children are born. The cell multiplies, and it multiplies in there was this I forget the name of the book, but there was this person in the New Age community, Melchizedek, something like that. And this person kind of went to Egypt, saw this unique pattern on the ground, like on somewhere, and it was this geometrical pattern of the flower of life. And certain biologists have noticed the way the biological cell, as the child is, in some sense, in the womb, developing. As the fetus is developing, before it gets to the fetus, the cells are multiplying. Okay, and the same way they multiply, for example, for this Melchizedek guy, were similar to that flower of life thing. So what I'm trying to say is that the world cannot hide itself from itself. What if truth is always here and we have blindfolds on? What if a person with like the most expensive sunglasses looks at night trying to see the stars and wonders why the stars are dim, and lives lifetimes not taking these glasses off? So what I'm saying is that your relationship with with your life based on your energy levels is in your control. If you notice a person who gets tired, they become agreeable. Have you noticed that? Because they just want to just go home, you know? And this agreeableness does not have to do with their honest opinion on the matter. It has to do with their energy level. And so if the biological body is not maintained properly, it will occupy your attention. Again, I said the chaos devours order. The knowledge, the egoic construct that positions reality through a certain scope of knowledge, it has to battle the forces of time. It's not just human beings that are living and dying. Thoughts are living and dying in the attention of humanity. And so the value of life has to be with how directly we can acknowledge our experience. And when you really, really are like sincere and honest and are like, okay, I'm alive once. Let me at least see I'm alive on this planet once. Like in this physical form, you know? And this life is important to question, you know? And this is the thing, when people try to fit into society, their minds are locked, are on lockdown. And it doesn't mean that they have to rebel against society. I feel the era of external rebellion is over. I feel this planet, every human being, I will just say this, if you want to contribute to humanity, do one thing. Live a gentle and efficient and intelligent life, please. And this gentleness is going to be a world where people are no longer selfish. They have stopped selling fish for good. Yeah. But I'm telling you, it's like there's selfishness will cease to exist because the selves are no longer in competition. It's as if they have lived in the competitive hamster wheel like it for many centuries in history. We will stand not trying to judge or constantly put into a thought or a box people, living beings. That's the rudest thing a human being can do, by the way. This is why racism is incredibly chaotic. You know, and it's very unfortunate that our civilization still has to refer to each other based on the color spectrum only. It's as if we have forgotten we have minds here. That the mind, it does not have a body. It is awareness, alertness. It is not something to be kept all the time. Life is not a program to, in some sense, uh, constantly, okay, this is what people say I should do. Let me do it. Well, you know, what else? What is it? What else could the meaning of life be? You know, and this doesn't mean rebel against nature. Not. It doesn't mean rebel against. Sorry, not nature. It doesn't mean rebel against the unnatural. It means acknowledge a new moment of study can occur. And this is pretty much, I find, meditation is the greatest thing a person can do on this planet. True meditation. And true meditation is letting go of the word meditation and just sitting still and silent somewhere. And in that stillness and silence, with your spine straight, as in some sense the Buddhic texts on meditation suggest, you sit still and silent, and you will suddenly have thoughts. You're not trying to do, and there's no instruction. This is a meditation. True meditation never had instructions. It was pure silence. This pure silence is suddenly how it's not that you should not have thoughts. The thoughts are mirrors. They are mirrors. And when you look into the mirror, suddenly you see a pattern of interest and opinion. You begin to see how your how your eyes are open in this world. And how the world looks has a lot to do with how you opened your eyes. How your individual consciousness, as psychologists suggest, by the age of 14, the person suddenly, the child is no longer just a kid. You know, it has evolved from kidhood into, in some sense, an individual personality, a person. We have to, it's like so many people are like, I see when I honestly, there's been moments where I've walked in bookstores, like, you know, general big bookstores, and I've come to sections where I've just seen the title of the section of the books, and I've just palmed like my head, you know. You know, like, a mall, it doesn't matter how many stores a mall has, it all has to do with what is being sold. And economy is, in some sense, how can I tell you, it's as if like when I wake up and live a day, you know what I notice? There are artificial values and certain just pretty much it's very funny, it's as if it's like a football match, you know, the marketers and the companies with the people on the streets trying to live like a efficient, visionary life. You see, it's as if when you see cruelty, what is, you know what happens? It's as if like chaos and it begins to settle in. When I see cruelty, violence, inefficiency, there's like a part of me is there. I've had moments where literally my face has been expressionless and I've just been present, but behind my eyes I've been there's been like a stream of tears. The person can be aware of their moment in ways where their intelligence abides by their nature. So most people, they're trying to look for thoughts. There's a weird thought hunting game going on in the knowledge arena, you know? And this thought hunting is arrogance. I'm saying it's arrogance. It is as if a person wants to get a better hat. You know, they're all fighting over what's the next best hat to wear. I'm telling you, take your hats off. Take your hats off because the show has begun. There's this very fascinating idea in the warrior's mindset where they acknowledge silence. Like, you know how when someone passes away, there's a moment of silence in funerals, in ceremonies, there's a moment of silence, a moment of remembrance and respect for the value of that energetic expression of the human vision. And so that moment of silence, there are some warriors, some great warriors who they have looked at the battlefield. And I'm talking about long ago, people holding weapons made of steel and uh, of steel and hate. The warrior would look at the battlefield, and I'm gonna paint a picture right now. This warrior, this king, he looks at his army, and he looks and he sees the army of the other sieging kingdom is upon them. And he just looks at everybody, his whole army, and he just starts running alone. Fearlessness is how you confront fear before it arises. And you see the inevitability of reality. No person can live forever, and to do so is weird. And so we have to acknowledge there's a beauty to our naturalness. There's a beauty in the alteration of our states of consciousness. A sort of, it's better for the free will to move in a natural body rather than a technological attempt towards making nature. That's what's going to happen. As technology evolves, curiosity is going to put on its gloves and in some sense try to restructure all patterns of behavior in technological ways. And I've envisioned this. There's been moments where I've sat down. There was a moment. How can I tell you? I have this notebook full of various projects I've wanted to, in some sense, do throughout this lifetime. And one of them was, in some sense, to just tap on the shoulder of the civilization and say, hey, everybody, where is all this going? Can we have that discussion? I am asking for a collective species to wonder again, to explore again the dimensions. Suddenly hate was completely stopped, as if even history was shocked. Oh my God, human beings stopped hating one another. How's that possible? And people suddenly are like, how is that possible? And they realize, oh my God, human beings have sacrificed their hate to see what their greater efficiency would look like. We have to put it aside. It's an inferior technology. Because violence, there's a style, like there's two types of class, I find. There's a class, a sort of class of, kind of, I'm talking about style in some sense, the style of people. You know, there's a sort of class of people who are running after things. And then there's a class of people who have kind of realized the inevitability of running after things, but then have come to a neutrality where they're wondering what next. And there is no, these two words, what next, is incredibly powerful. It is like, it's like, a sort of efficient fuel for the shuttle of how conceptually we're transitioning. The warrior would acknowledge that life is present and it is on a mission. And this mission is only there because this war is an emergency. A person should never, it's as if you should be kind of like that martial art master that regardless of how many people kind of spoke to him, disrespected him, he was just silent and still. You see this in the greatest martial art masters, that they have no ego. It's not that they have no ego, they don't bring it out until it is necessary. Your awareness will change. This is why no moment can become, the data of one moment of being cannot be convincing enough. No person can ever be convinced of truth to even find it. Because the conceiver of truth is changing. Like right now I'm speaking to you, like just let's wonder about the idea of, let's just entertain this kind of dynamic, this traditional dynamic. Like in a certain point in our history, we acknowledge the mind and body in a certain way, and we acknowledge it as if there's a body and there's a soul, but when the body moves, there it seems there's a mind. So in the movement of the body comes into existence the consideration of the mind. So the mind has to do with an individual form moving. The mind is an idea that has value only to the degree that it just points you to this notion. We have to open. Imagine like every person right now had a jetpack on they didn't know about, or let's say they had wings that they didn't know about, and they suddenly see these wings are their honest exploration and true living. There's nothing else. There's no mystical. I don't understand what certain kind of enlightenment kind of groups what they're doing on this planet. I'm like, what is that? It's like uh, people are not meant to go sit in caves because it took us like a long evolutionary period to step out of caves, to step out of a certain way of being. So the nature of the universe, once studied, will show that it is changing in such a way that what's the point of having thoughts on objects? Like why is the linguistic reality being taken seriously? And this is where the debate arises, the philosophical global debate arises. Like every nation's greatest philosophers are trying to attempt this. I'm probably gonna write a book about like before I transition out of this world, I'm going to create these sort of problems, not problems, puzzles meant to solve. I'm going to leave behind a book of puzzles. And the reason is because if we were minds, nothing would be strange. But when we are bodies, and in some sense, we are strangers. It's a very multidimensional occurrence, this moment of life that we're all, in some sense, we find ourselves suddenly being the performer in. Just by being present, there comes responsibility with that. You're like, oh man, I came into manifestation. I came into existence. Now I'm responsible for this existence. Oh man, I was just pure silence back then. And so you see, that the heart of man must be freed from ignorance. Mark Twain has this very funny quote. He says, never argue with stupid people. They will drag you down to their level and then beat you with experience. And honestly, so many, I find, I don't like a lot of celebrities, I find they understand, but they would totally agree with Mark Twain. Because the point is not for people to just vocally come into agreement. It has to do with what we're seeing behind our eyes, and how that's implying what is in front of our eyes, and what is that relationship even, and how much has it been wondered about. Has technology been a toy, and humanity has evolved into this overgrown consciousness that's still playing with this technological toy? Like, what is nature? Were the secrets of nature that boring that we forgot about it, that we all decided to just create an ecosystem in an ecosystem and call that home? Like, I'll be honest, like, the world is too natural for our unnatural shenanigans. And Albert Einstein has this other quote where he says, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. And that's true. You know why? Because the explanation is meant to show you, you need to see something. Okay? When you see something, how something works, you suddenly have no problems about it. When you suddenly realize how the system is working, think of it this way. Problems can be said to be just moments where the data has not arrived yet. the proper data. That means the solution is this endless endurance kind of effort, and the problem, it has to do with the data that this effort brings with it, or opens itself up to it, or the data opens up to it. This world is filled with incredible mysteries, because even our how can I tell you, we are material beings, but living in identifying as characters in stories of our own beliefs. Like, what is this? We have to recalibrate. Mr. Within will say that, um, how can I say it? The book, I don't know how would I don't know. I'd probably call it Mr. Within's Global Initiatives, something like that. These global initiatives are going to be challenges for various professions of people, various sectors of the educational system of all nations to contribute. That means children in unevolved countries should not necessarily get out of that country. They should evolve the country they're in. You see, I am, how can I tell you this? It's like the world has torn itself apart, and it has torn itself apart in stories. And these stories have gone into motion in ways that the person will live a lifetime never wondering if the story could be different. And so we have to acknowledge what is nature and what is language and what is all that we're saying now. Why are we here? This is a question every day. These talks they extend out of just my bewilderment of why is this happening? Why is existence designed to be seen by an unknown seer, or by an unknown mind, by the mysteries that are how. It's very funny. It's as if the mind is like a sun and thoughts are its beams, as if the waves of the brain travel in the ears of other brains, you know? And so the most important thing, nothing evolves a civilization, doesn't matter where. It could be, doesn't matter, like, if there's some planets we don't know about and those civilizations are somehow tuning in. I'm telling you, uh, regardless of the vastness of the audience, the unknown mystery stands. And every nation should find its greatest minds, and the greatest minds should find each other instantly. And we have to reincorporate certain global cultural programs. That means I want you to think just like how a programmer writes code on a computer. Language moving in humans' mind is like code on a computer. Like that dude in the Matrix looking at that computer screen, those green kind of like symbols coming down, you know. So I'm telling you, thought moving in the minds of people throughout the day is like that. So this program is mainly written by nature, but because nature has come into a unique free will position, this free will has made nature. This free will has become God. It's as if God was outside, then God came inside, and when God came inside, we suddenly realized we are God. This goes back to this very esoteric and even a better word I could say, metaphysical kind of abstract concept, okay, in philosophy, where it is very I don't want to say it's like a big deal, but I'm saying it's important, I guess, to acknowledge it. It's this notion they had, certain traditional cultures had, where it was how God entered the body. You see, in Christian theology, and I don't want to comment too much into it because that's going to move the talk towards a different direction. But in Christian theology, and not just in Christian theology and Abrahamic religions, there has been the notion of possession. And possession is an attention grabbing word. And people should be. So, anyways, and this notion of possession has been the entrance of another intelligence within a current system of intelligence. That means there's a sort of normality, and then suddenly you can say like the person suddenly there's an accident or an emergency or some stressful situation, and suddenly they're no longer in that normal self. You see, it's as if there's suddenly been the attention has moved in a chaotic way. Playfulness is the ultimate resolution of chaos and order because it brings with itself, it's like your free will wants continuity and God wants submission. So you are pretty much in this moment like this continuous submission to the forces of nature. Now, nature, we can't change it. I can't look at this tree and be like, hey, tree, why don't you suddenly like do a backflip, you know? The tree won't suddenly come out of like the soil and just spin in the air and suddenly land back in the soil with the roots probably go properly going back in. Do you know what I mean? It's like that's in the domain of abstraction. It is in some sense how I'm saying the mind cannot change matter, but matter seems to be leading to mind. Or what else could evolution mean? How else can we be bodies and having brains and minds? So we have to wonder. We have to wonder about the deeper implications of content in one dimension of awareness. So pretty much the civilization is going to find a new excitement. There's going to be a new wave of excitement in humanity, in all human beings, because human beings, they don't realize this. We don't. None of us like. I don't want to say none of us, but like we are the way society is designed. We're worshiping. We're not worshiping idols. We are worshiping ourselves as idols. And because we're worshiping ourselves as idols, the idol has a sort of shape, form, structure, story. And because it has that shape, form, structure, story, the idol, in some sense, is constantly in a changing world being broken. That means the kid says, "Say, sky, don't dare rain today," and suddenly it starts raining, and the kid's like, "Don't you dare, sky! Don't you do it!" The kid's seeing like a cloud come by. Don't do it, kid. But anyways. The smart choice is a harmony between all dimensions of your perception. You study the self to realize the moment is at peace with itself. It is man's mind that is jiggling in like strange ways. I don't know why I use that term, but it's like our attention is coagulated. It's like various archetypes, or how certain memories, you were a person in those memories, they are all coagulating. They're all coagulating in a space. So your mind acts as a space of awareness for your body. And you begin to see thoughts act as a space of awareness for in some sense, as wait, let me redesign that sentence. Whew. Once we get bored with just living for ourselves, we will eventually be left to pay attention to the what's actually happening in this world. Let us live for humanity. We only get one lifetime to do it. Our eyes are open as a species in ways that no other species on this planet is. Their eyes are not open the way ours is. And our eyes have been open in such profound ways that we have even wondered about what we could see beyond the clouds in the sky. We have attempted to leave the planet. And it's as if human society, humanity looked at, the first attempt of going into outer space, and they're like nature. It's as if the first attempts at space flight, which were tragic, unfortunately, they were like the world kind of saying, my child, don't leave me. But if you are, I believe in you. So like some sort of notion like that, where the world is there's a sort of collective appreciation for the individual's existence, regardless of what sector or cultural kind of system they're manifest and they're present in. Language is a tool that is wielded not by only men, but by gods as well. We constantly see in ancient mythology, gods came down and spoke to man, and then there were certain men who went to God, and there were certain, like, it's like the Abrahamic prophet, the prophet. I'm speaking simply about the idea of the word. The notion of a prophet in Abrahamic religions is a sort of reception. So the notion is called revelation. So revelation was suddenly some person saw something that was very huge. So huge that like thousands of years after that person passed away, what he saw suddenly is still kept in the eyes of people, you know? I'm being pulled to a sort of natural silence. Thanks for listening, guys. I want to leave you off with this notion, and of course say something about the subtitle before I leave. Consciousness streams. Watch how your mind moves. And thoughts, for me, they have different speeds, and they have different structures, and they have different, like they move in different ways. There are certain moments where I look at, like, let's say like a tree, and I just see a tree. At most the word tree comes into my mind. But there's moments where I look at a tree and instead of the word tree, what comes to my mind is a geometrical expression, as if my imagination can see the geometrical alignments of how my image could see shape in something that is already shaped. You know, so the mind responds differently in various moments, and so to cultivate self-awareness, which is pretty much the essence of meditation and the essence of living, this awareness has to be efficient, because in its efficiency, vision progress occurs in an incredible way. So it's as if we don't have to all suddenly stop what we're doing, but we have to start doing things in a totally new way. That means the first attempt is not to try to suddenly go from a world of chaos to suddenly world peace. It doesn't happen that way. First, you gotta take a world of chaos to a world of no chaos. There's still no peace yet, but you gotta reduce the chaos. And how you reduce the chaos is by redirecting the attention of the future generations to the ability of the species. And we are, of course, language is the mask of our mind. What else, is at our disposal, aside from writing and other forms, dancing, I guess, too. So thanks for tuning in, guys. Study your mind. I'll say this last thing. Heraclitus, this Greek philosopher, he says, no man steps in the same river twice, and it's not the same man, and it's not the same river. What he's saying there is that in every moment, you're kind of like it's a new moment. What that means is like when you put your hand in a river and suddenly put your hand back again, it's the totally different atoms and particles of the river that are hitting you. So totally different water particles are hitting your hand, so it can't be the same river. But in your mind, you see it as the same river, but Heraclitus is saying not even you are the same self. Because if time is dynamic, self cannot be contained in just a snapshot of time. So if it's too dynamic, like this is pretty much what the educational system has to decide. It has to decide. It has to decide if it wants to open the gates of knowledge, like as if people are thirsting for knowledge, and education suddenly globally was a universal human right. As if not a person was allowed to have freedom of speech only, or freedom of expression. The person had an ability to have, how can I tell you, like freedom to know. And this is a pillar of civilization that must be, in some sense, protected. And not protected with this kind of fear of it, like not being there. It's just the notion that if we want efficient civilization, we got to act efficiently. What else can we do? It doesn't matter all our beliefs or whatever. It's as if whenever something inefficient happens, the attempt of the minds in that sector or in that environment, they have been unsuccessful. That means violence is a sign that that man can still be an animal. I thought we evolved from the animal. I thought we became human beings, yet why is the animalistic, the violent side still open? The thing is, because people don't know how to handle violence. Violence is an implication of the nature of the world. The eyes of nature are open before ours could close. And if we are natural beings, perhaps death is just the door. Much blessings and namaste.